Coming up on the Inside Indiana Business Television podcast, we talk with Roger Penske about what would have been race weekend, head to Speedway to learn about the impact there, and talk to a motorsports insider about the future of racing. We look at a high-tech social distancing tool with Indiana connections. We talk to the co-owner of a bar that had to close in the wake of the pandemic. Community health centers continue to play a pivotal role, and Hoosier businesses prepare for a post-pandemic workforce. Welcome to the Inside Indiana Business Television podcast. I'm Andy Ober. Under normal circumstances, we'd be talking about last weekend's 104th running of the Indianapolis 500. However, circumstances are anything but normal, and the pandemic has silenced the engines that would have traditionally roared at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. IMS owner Roger Penske joined Inside Indiana Business host Gary Dick to talk about the economic impact of moving the race to August and what the future holds.
Gary, I wish I was sitting there next to you, and I was just kind of working the car over here today, getting ready for Carburation Day on Friday and getting ready to race on Sunday. But, we're in a period of time in our lives with this pandemic that probably more important than racing. It's about our friends, our fans, our associates that succumb to this terrible disease. When we think about the 500, I call it generational. These people that love to come every year, they pass the tickets down. We want to be sure we do the right thing. And I think the most important thing we do is be sure when we do have the race, we do it properly, safely, and healthy. And I think in conjunction with the mayor and certainly the governor, who are big fans of the track, we have to stay in step with our health departments. But from my perspective right now, sitting here today, I'm hoping that August 23rd will happen and we'll have a great race. But I don't want to give any false impressions that I know the answer. But let's be smart, let's be positive, and let's race.
Tradition is such a big part of the Indianapolis 500. Can we expect tradition, as we have known it for so many years, as part of the race come August?
Well, I would assure you that if we have a race in August, we had the opportunity to meet certainly with the parade people last week. We have a plan. Obviously, they're going through their whole constituency to determine exactly how we'll affect it. But these are things that I guess it's a rolling, week after week. But that tradition we want to have, and certainly we're counting on decorating the city. We want people to have, house parties. We got to think about the old timers. I think all of that's got to be scheduled in. And Allison and Mark Miles were so important to the Super Bowl. They're right at the top of that, and I think that our execution will be a good one. But it's so hard to say. And look, I look at this as not a short-term investment, and I would hope that the citizens of Indiana understand that the Speedway is a long-term investment. So, we're dealing with things that are unprecedented in our lifetime. So we've got to have the ability to be able to trade off and do some things that might make it better for everyone from a safety and health perspective.
Roger, can you give us perspective as we sit here today on July 4 weekend? See, NASCAR has begun to run again. IndyCar will do so in a few weeks. Can we expect, in your view, fans in the stands come July 4 for that big IndyCar NASCAR weekend?
Well, let me first start with June 6th, where we're running in Texas. That'll be our first race, and we will run without fans in Texas. From a July 4th perspective, our plan is to run with fans. We're looking at social distancing. We've had health department officials out talking with the senior leadership, Mark Miles and his team. But again, that's going to be a call that we'll make, whether it's with or without fans. We'll make that call coming up probably, in the next couple of weeks here. We still have some time, and I think we need to stay in step, with the state and local authorities from the standpoint of what we do there. We will have a race on July 4th at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Roger, final question for you. That's just your personal thoughts. Not having an Indianapolis 500 on Memorial Day weekend, it's obviously something that's very important to you and has been part of your life for a number of years. But your thoughts this weekend without a race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway?
Well, as you know, Gary, I go back to 1951 with my dad when I came there as a young man. And to think about the years that I've attended, the 18 times that we've been in Winter Circle, and to think that in the 1940s they didn't have the race, and it hadn't been moved, but to think that this year that we'll be sitting at the Speedway watching a rerun of that race of last year is going to be something. But I guess more important than all of that is from a country perspective, from the United States, we've got to remember the military, the men and women, the first responders I mentioned, these healthcare workers. Those are the people that we've got to cherish and support during Memorial Day. But it's got to be tough. I think that we'll get through it. You know, racers are tough. I mean, you hit the wall one hour and 2 hours later, you're back on the track. So we got to think that way as we go forward. I think from a business perspective, all of our sponsors, all of our commercial people that we're connected with, all are looking at everything they're doing, everything they're spending. What position are they going to be in the future? Fortunately, we've got a very good group of owners. We had a call with them here in the last 24 hours talking about the schedule. We've been able to work out a schedule that's, I would say, flexible and to the point, where we'll have at least 14 races. There'll be some in the east, some in the west, and some in centrally, ovals and road courses. So to me, with that type of schedule, that we can have 12 to 13 to 14 races as a continued schedule to take this whole group of cars and the series around the country to come back to Indianapolis each year. I think that's going to be our main goal, and I think we're focusing on that. Our TV partner, NBC, has really stepped up here. And we expect them to have probably more races on the network versus just on cable. So I think it's network. I think it's sponsorship. The team's viability. Many of them, I'm sure, have gotten some help from the standpoint of the the PPP loan perspective. So those things certainly help in this time that we're in today.
This year marks the third time the green flag hasn't fallen at the Indianapolis 500 in the month of May, and the first time since 1945. Around Indiana, reporter Mary Rachel Redmond traveled to Speedway to find out how a silent May is impacting businesses.
No cars, no checkered flags, no kissing of the bricks, and sadly, no milk for the victor. At least, not this May. But it isn't the first time the greatest spectacle in racing had to change its plans to address a global crisis.
In conflict, Speedway officials suspend all racing activity for the
Both
duration.
World War I and World War II,
just before Pearl Harbor brought us into the Second World War,
forced the race to be canceled.
It was March of 1917 when the word came down and then the Indianapolis 500 was canceled. So there was no race in 17 or 18.
As a landing field.
But the track didn't sit idle.
The infield was used as an aviation depot. There was a barracks down on Main Street with 3 battalions there. And so it was an aviation refueling depot for the military during World War I.
Ironically, part of that aviation depot on Main Street is now the home of Dallara USA, where they too are chipping in to fight COVID-19.
Dallara has been very active during the crisis. In fact, in the very first 2 weeks when basically we had the shutdown in Indianapolis, we wanted to help the community, and we put our shop and our guys helping to cut material to build gowns and masks. The guys were all super excited. Obviously, we wanted to do something to defeat the virus, go to build race car parts again and go racing.
But without that goosebump tingling roar of the engines from across the street, how will the town of Speedway deal without its biggest cash cow of the year, now moved to August?
Honestly, it's pretty awful.
As quick as possible.
Chris Hill, owner of Dawson's on Main, says his sales are down 85% for the month of May.
It's a huge deal for us. We just hope that it happens in August or, September or October. Just this year would be awesome for the psyche of the town, for the psyche of the community, for Indianapolis, for the state of Indiana.
And it would have been a great coming out party for the town of Speedway, which continues to revamp its look with 25 new businesses popping up in just the last few years. But now town leaders are challenged with serving up solutions to help keep restaurants open.
We're looking at ways that we can expand out into right-of-way, kind of put up barriers and help them get some more outdoor space, as the city is doing for businesses in Indianapolis.
If things were normal this year at the track, Mario Andretti would be behind the wheel of the fan favorite two-seater. Scott Jasek, owner of Indy Racing Experience, tells me he's already implemented extensive coronavirus safety measures.
We have a whole protocol on how we would execute it, both with keeping 6 foot apart, making sure people only wear the fire suit and the head sock and all those things once. We've purchased some UV technology that could kill germs on the helmet and the gloves and things of that nature.
Even though drivers won't be putting on their gloves and helmets until at least August, one thing is for sure. Things on and off the track will eventually get back into gear.
Back home again.
Mary Rachel Redman, Inside Indiana Business.
With the Indy 500 and the entire IndyCar series idled by the pandemic, the road ahead for the series looks bumpy. Racer.com writer and motorsports analyst Robin Miller discussed what the future holds for racing with Bill Benner on Inside Indiana Sports.
Just your perspective on Roger Penske and his activity up to this point.
Well, Bill, and anybody that doesn't think this guy's committed, he has been here almost every Saturday for the last 3 months. I mean, he's in town every week, sometimes for 1 day, sometimes for 2 days. Usually flies in on Saturday morning, walks the grounds, makes notes. If you guys can go out to the Speedway right now and see all the things he's already done, he's widened Georgetown roads to get rid of that horrible crush behind the main grandstands, more video boards all over the place, knocked down trees to impair people's sightlines, new restrooms, new concession stands. Everything's mowed. Everything. There's not going to be any more mud puddles like we used to see in the 60s and 70s. Everything's paved. It looks so good. And, I think his commitment is, here's a guy that's got 64,000 employees around the world, and this is his focus. I mean, on Sunday nights, I send him letters from fans or questions and stuff, and we have that's usually when we talk, and he's up at midnight or 1 a.m. He sleeps 4 hours a night. He's 83 years old. I've never met anybody smarter or more driven, and thank God he owns the Speedway, because I don't know how anybody else would get through this time right now.
Well, obviously, we're not going to be able to enjoy the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and another great Indy 500 this weekend. We wait till August for that. The NTT IndyCar Series, however, is scheduled to open in June, the first Saturday in June down in Texas. Your thoughts about the series finally getting underway, even though there won't be fans down in Texas?
It's funny, people, Bill, say, well, IndyCar, NASCAR beat them again to the punch. They've been on TV already. Well, they got 36 races scheduled. IndyCar had 17, and they start much earlier than IndyCar. And the fact that Eddie Gossage in Texas was willing to put on a race with no fans, I think Roger had to make him a sweetheart deal, maybe no sanction fee. But Roger Penske knew how important it was. We've got to get started. We've got to get in front of the public. And that Saturday they might get a decent TV number out of it, even though there won't be any fans there. But then you go all the rest of June, you're not going to have anything. So the next race is going to be the IMS road course race. And then, July, August, and September are just going to be slammed. So Roger's done it. He's more and more, like I wrote a story yesterday, Road America is going to go from June to July and become a doubleheader. You got a doubleheader at Iowa. You got a doubleheader at Laguna Seca, because you've got to try and get, like Roger said, 12, 13, 14 races, because you got sponsorship commitments.
Robin, talk about the July 4th weekend, Brickyard 400, and the Indy Grand Prix. Does your sense, or do your people think that there will actually be fans in the stands? Because that's Governor Holcomb. That's when he says the state will be fully opened up.
Well, it's gallows humor, but the crowds that the Brickyard hasn't drawn in the last 4 or 5 years, you're going to have plenty of room to spread out. It doesn't matter. Saturday or Sunday, there'll be plenty of available seating, and you won't have to sit next to anybody. There'll be social distancing, it'll take care of itself. But what's good about that weekend, Bill, is you got Indy cars and Xfinity running together on the road course on Saturday. I think Jimmy Johnson is maybe going to make his IndyCar debut that Saturday, which would really be cool. That might sell some extra tickets. Then Sunday's the Brickyard. Well, Jay Fry, who runs the competition side of IndyCar for the last several years, has said, I want to have an IndyCar NASCAR doubleheader like at Iowa or Chicago or Richmond or somewhere like that. So you have the Indy cars run on Saturday night, NASCAR Cup cars run on Sunday, and both of them could use some help on oval track attendance. And I think they're willing to work together and help each other. And this will be the very first litmus test whether do people care enough to come watch. But I think NASCAR's best races are at Watkins Glen and Sonoma on a road course. So I think it'll be a success. Robin,
With Roger Penske owning the Speedway, but more importantly, owning the series, it came up when he was announced as the owner. But are the other teams, again, everybody admires and respects Roger Penske, are the other teams assured that they're going to get a fair shake in every kind of controversy that might come along?
Well, let's put it this way. If A.J. Foyt thinks it's a good deal and he's not going to get flim-flammed, Foyt's been one of the biggest, he's probably been one of the biggest voices saying the best thing ever was Roger Penske buying the Speedway. RP's he's too classy, Bill. He's too smart. He's not even on the stand anymore at IndyCar races. He knows he's got to run the series, and there can't be any favoritism. And yeah, there hasn't been one car owner I've talked to that wasn't over the moon that Roger Penske's the guy that's making the decisions, calling the shots, spending the money, and looking down the road for the future. I mean, he's always one step ahead of the posse in everything he's ever done. And I think this is, I've heard more people say in the last 2 months, God, I feel sorry for Roger Penske. Now, nobody's ever said that before because he's lost a bunch of money, and he's so gung-ho about getting Indy going. But people say, they can't run Indy without fans. Well, I got news for you. Roger Penske, if they got to go to October, he's going to have the Indy 500 with fans.
Hey, Rob, we got about a minute left. Just handicap the series for us. Obviously, Team Penske is always at the top. The Andretti team, Ganassi. Just who do you think is going to be there at the end with the championship trophy?
Well, Rossi's been close the last 2 years. Dixon's still the best driver. Scott Dixon's still the best driver in the series. And then we got Will Power, Joseph Newgarden, and Simon Pagenaud for Penske. But Colton Herta got everybody's attention last year. He wasn't old enough to drink. He didn't look like he's old enough to shave. Won 2 races, had some DNFs, but I think he's going to be a factor in the championship. Brian Herta's son, and he's the future. And you've got all these young guys. There's Pato Ward and there's Rinus VK and there's Felix Rosenquist. You got all these young guys that are going to win some races. So I think the competition has never been better. You got 24 cars within 0.8 of a second of each other, sometimes on a 3-mile road course or 4-mile road course like Elkhart Lake. So it'll just probably be the same guys for the championship because you got to have good pit stops and consistency. But I think Colton Herta will be your sleeper and your dark horse, and then you got a guy like Will Power, who's been the fastest guy in the series for the last 10 or 15 years, and he's been kind of forgot about. Don't forget about Will Power. This is a contract year for him, so he'll be tough.
Hey, Robin, as we wrap up, go back to the shot of you just over your shoulder is a great photo from back in the day, and that's your buddy, Jim Hurtubise.
Jim Hurtubise had just gone 149.6. He beat Eddie Sachs, the pole sitter, by 3 miles an hour. And Parnelli Jones is standing in his pit watching, and Hurt's on the PA system, and they're saying, Jim, this is you're a rookie, and you almost went 150 miles an hour, and it's the last day of qualifying. And he says, you think I'm fast? He goes, well, you see Parnelli Jones when he gets here. Pretty funny. But, those were the eras that got us all hooked.
And hey, Robin,
Gary's got a question for you.
Yeah, Robin. So on that day, last day of qualifying, how many people were in the stands probably that day?
Oh my God! There on the 4th day of qualifying in the 60s, there was probably 50,000 people.
Yeah,
probably 50,000, Gary. And that's when they used to get 200,000 for pole day because people couldn't get a ticket to the race, so they had to go to qualifying.
It's always good to see you, and appreciate your insight, and hope to see you again soon in person.
Okay, boys, always fun.
Remember, you can catch Inside Indiana Business Television on stations throughout the state every weekend. Head to InsideIndianaBusiness.com to check listings. As companies look to the future, social distancing will be key to a return to operations. An Indiana company is playing a part in the launch of laser technology to help that happen. The CEO of Fishers-based Advanced Industrial Marketing talked to us about his company's role.
Talk about, first of all, your company and what the real focus heading into the pandemic of your company has been.
Good afternoon, Gary. Thank you for having me. The focus of advanced industrial marketing before the pandemic has been mainly focusing on major industrials and helping them improve the material handling, safety, and efficiency of their operations. We were heavily involved in proximity detection before it came a fun word. And what we're doing now is just an extension of our previous business model. And we're just, we repurposed some of our technology to administer help in today's day and age.
Yeah, and you launched the company in 1998. You were a Purdue grad. Talk about, first of all, this is wearable. One of the products, wearable technology. Talk about how it works.
The wearable technology is essentially a small radio transmission device. It's using a unique protocol called UWB, ultra wideband. And essentially, the wearable device is a small transmitter and receiver. It's sending a signal out and trying to communicate with other tags or wearables of our make. Once they communicate with each other, they identify that the distance is being respected. However, when a certain threshold has been reached, i.e. 6 feet, we alert the operator or the wearer of that badge with a strong vibration and a vibrant LED flash, alerting him the presence of another tag within a 6 feet radius.
Is technology developed over in Europe that you're bringing to the United States? You have another product that really tracks outdoor distancing as well from Europe. Talk about what you're hearing, because these the wearable devices, as an example, really kind of cut across all industries, whether it's schools and museums, factories, and you're getting some interest from around the country.
Absolutely, it's been pretty phenomenal, the interest. We are getting great feedback from our customers, and we're hearing from a variety of industries. We just heard this morning from a small Montessori school in Georgia. And then all the way to, we've received an inquiry from the corporate headquarters of one of the world's largest corporations. So small to big, everyone's interested in this technology. And we already have active projects from the arts community, the museums, parks are all thinking about implementing this for their patrons.
Advanced Industrial Marketing is the company. It's based in Fishers. Rob Riscosi, the CEO of the company. Rob, thanks for taking the time to join us. Very interesting technology, and we definitely want to keep up to date with progress, because it sounds like the interest is coming in and will develop in the coming weeks and months. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Gary.
All right.
After nearly 30 years in business, the old Pros Table Sports Bar in Indianapolis's Broad Ripple neighborhood is closing. The bar is just one victim of the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown. Co-owner Nicole Harlan Aprizu and her husband operate several other restaurants throughout Indy and joined us to talk about the future of the industry.
Old Pros Table, as I said, a staple in Broad Ripple for many, many years. Had to be a really tough decision to decide to close.
It was definitely a tough decision. You know, it had a couple different factors to it. Our lease for that building was up at the end of March. So, you know, we had to really factor in the loss of this year. You know, we lost St. Patrick's Day, all of NCAA, all of basketball playoffs. And, you know, those revenues really ride not just Old Pros Table, but sports bars in general, you know, through the leaner summer months. And, you know, we had to weigh the cost of that loss with the possibility that there may not be professional sports or college sports this year, you know, to decide whether or not it was worth trying to claw it out through March. So for us, at the end of the day, it just wasn't worth it. You know, given this uncertainty going back into it.
Yeah.
So we made a tough call.
Yeah, Nicole, going forward, restaurants, bars, and others begin to slowly reopen, but the challenges remain with social distancing, the restrictions in bar areas, and those types of things. Talk about the challenges that you and other operators all over the state of Indiana are facing.
You know, I think that there are so many challenges that, you know, I think people just don't really take a look at when talking about opening. You know, you really cannot just, you know, flip a switch and say, okay, now we're going to open. You know, some of the concepts don't have outside dining. Some people are trying to figure out how to make that work. when this whole thing started, we had to basically switch to entirely different restaurant models. We changed our menus, our hours. We had to lay off a large quantity of our staff. We're trying to figure out how to do a totally different thing than what we had been doing for, in some locations, 10 years or more. So for us, the challenges were, change the menu, change the website, change the social media and hours and service and, who can we buy and, how can we get the food? Because distributors are having the same kinds of problems that we are.
Yeah.
So, those were the challenges from the early onset, ongoing, all sort of the same thing in reverse. We're going to be operating a full service restaurant at some point and also a carryout restaurant at some point. And those two things for most people did not exist simultaneously.
Yep.
So, you're looking at, at Delicia, we're going to be adding outside dining out in our back patio, which we've never had, plus indoor dining when it's allowed, plus also operating a carryout business with limited staff, limited resources, food shortages.
Yeah.
Having, pay people to sanitize restrooms and surfaces and doors. And, there's a lot of added expenses to that as well.
And very quickly, we're about almost out of time, but I know you've got employees, many others do, concerned about working in this environment. Liability, very quickly, liability is an issue too for restaurant owners.
Definitely. Employees are certainly, frightened about the return. There's a risk versus reward, scenario for them as well. There's a possibility that they are not going to be able to return to anywhere close to the income they were making previously, right. And they're putting them at risk to do so.
Nicole, we're out of time right now, but Nicole Harlan-Aprise, thanks for joining us. You've got great properties on the north side. Look forward to having them open back up, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Community health centers are playing a pivotal role in the battle against COVID-19 for the most vulnerable Hoosiers by providing support to help keep them out of the hospital. Indiana Primary Healthcare Association CEO Ben Harvey joined Kylie Valletta in the business of health.
Before we talk about how COVID-19 has impacted your work, let's talk just a little bit about community health centers in general. There's 35 of them in Indiana. Explain the mission of these centers.
Yeah, so community health centers are community-driven primary care healthcare providers that really come in terms of Indiana. They're from the lake to the river. And so they're federally designated clinics that, again, provide primary care services, outpatient services. So they provide medical, dental, and behavioral health services. They provide them in underserved areas of the state. They are community-driven, so their boards are composed of at least 50% of patients. They serve all patients regardless of their ability to pay, so patients that have Medicare, patients that are uninsured, underinsured. They're designed to be open points of access, particularly for communities that are underserved, like what was mentioned in the top, where the minority populations particularly are frequent utilizers of community health centers. So community health centers really are driven to be those community-based outpatient primary care health homes for underserved Hoosiers.
Okay, so then COVID-19, of course, changes everything. So explain how community health centers have really been on the front lines of this crisis here in Indiana.
Yeah, so there are 35 health centers in the state of Indiana. Again, they have about 250 clinical sites. They serve right around 600,000 Hoosiers every year. And because of the way the COVID-19 has impacted communities of color, particularly in the state of Indiana, health centers have been on the front line in testing, treatment, that connection as a primary care provider. And one of the biggest things that they've done is in terms of reaching patients. There's a big push right now to reach patients where they are, to reach into a patient's home, because you have to either be quarantined or with the governor's stay-at-home order. How can you continue to provide primary care services? So FQHCs, community health centers in the state of Indiana, all 35 now provide telemedicine services and fairly robust telemedicine services. So again, it's kind of a paradigm shift of the provider coming to find the patient in the patient's home. And that's a big transformative event, kind of a return to form for medicine to some degree, but a big transformative event. So you can pretty easily connect with your provider. Also, a piece of that in terms of telemedicine that the health centers have been focusing on in a partnership with the state is a program called Virtual Care at Home. So if someone's COVID suspected or COVID positive, and they are concerned about either going into the emergency room or having to travel to a hospital, they can be connected with the health center, and the health center can monitor and evaluate that patient in their home and stay connected with them through the length of either their infection or their bad feelings. And so we've piloted that with a number of health centers in the state and had some pretty good success with it so far. And again, really appreciative of the partnership that the state's entered into with us, and also our hospital partners and other primary care providers and other healthcare providers in the state. It's truly been an amazing effort, and we're happy to be able to serve the role that we have.
And it really has been huge strides made in that area. You've more than doubled the number of community health centers that now have telemedicine. And this is especially important for your population in particular. You mentioned, there's transportation issues. Can you talk a little about that?
Oh, yeah, tremendously. Yeah, there's tremendous transportation issues. Be you in a rural area or be you in an urban area, having to drive 50 miles in a rural area to access primary care, to access services, having to make 2 or 3 different bus connections in urban areas of the state, being able to, and also if you have a kid, we have 3 kids at home. If you have to take a child in with you, if you're taking the child into the primary care provider, that's a significant piece of time, and it's not always easy to get in to see your primary care physician. So telemedicine really starts to bridge that gap. It really reduces the time. It's beneficial for the patient. It helps the patient connect to providers in a way they couldn't otherwise do. And it also, too, again, I want to focus on this. This is a big piece, is that idea of a provider coming to see you at your home, that connection, even though it's virtual, that connection and that opportunity to talk to a provider in your own home, that's a big deal. That really is. And so I've seen some national numbers. We've seen probably about 25% of all Americans now have visited a primary care physician or a physician via telemedicine, which is a huge increase in terms of access to care for everybody, particularly the underserved when there's transportation barriers or other barriers to care.
Okay, and just a few seconds left, but we hear some medical centers are struggling financially. How are community health centers weathering that storm?
Yeah, it's same for community health centers. You've seen a big drop off in patients going in to see the physician. We've seen a big drop in patient volume. So we've taken a financial hit. A number of health centers have. Health centers are pretty robust. They're community-driven. They're mission-driven organizations, so they're always going to be there to provide services. There's been some relief from the federal side. We've been working with the state, trying to figure out if there's an avenue there for the state to support health centers. But I would encourage people, if you need to see a primary care physician, health centers are a good place to go, particularly with the ability to see a physician via telemedicine.
Okay, Ben, thanks so much for being on the show today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much.
And finally this week, COVID-19 has vastly changed how the workforce will look, feel, and function in the future. Lumina Foundation Vice President of Learning and Work, Chauncey Lennon, says it's critically important for Indiana businesses to work with higher education and training providers to prepare. Lennon joined Gary with Insight.
Well, let's talk about workforce talent. It certainly has been an issue for a long, long time throughout the state here in Indiana, and that's getting the talent that it's needed into specific industries. The pandemic, I think you could argue, is really shining a light, an extra shiny light, if you will, on that challenge. What are the challenges, Chauncey, that we face as a state when it comes to talent and getting the trained workforce needed for business and industry?
That's a great question. It's certainly true that the pandemic is accelerating the trends we've been seeing. And I think those trends really point in 3 important directions about what needs to change and what people need to do differently. The first is thinking about what we need to do in terms of providing educational programs. We need more short-term credential programs. These are programs that are flexible, affordable, and really tied to occupations that can range from anything from 6 weeks to 12 weeks to 3 months and sometimes even a year. But the point is that there's something you can go and pursue them in a short amount of time. So we need to see more of those. We need to see employers thinking about how they can help their workforce understand what skills are in demand. Nobody should be going into training hoping that the skills they're learning are valued. They have to know in advance this is what employers are looking for. And then finally, workers themselves have to really understand the importance of training post-high school, the value of retraining. But that's going to involve seeking out information, seeking out the community colleges and other training providers that are offering high-quality programs, and getting to those programs and completing towards the credential.
And really, I think, too, underscores the importance of non-degree credentials. The 4-year degrees are certainly very important, but these non-degree credentials, associate degrees, and other types of educational opportunities, very important in the process.
I think that's exactly right. And I think the point to keep in mind is that that's true both for younger workers, we're seeing a trend where many people getting BAs often get a short-term credential on top of that. And it's also obviously true for older workers who are finding themselves without a job in an industry they may have been in for years. Their skills are maybe no longer needed in that industry, but they'll be needed in other sectors, and often that will only have to combine them with new skills. So that these short-term credentials are really the sort of ticket labor market for those who have found themselves suddenly stranded by the pandemic.
I think it's also interesting that the Lumina Foundation, with the support of the Kresge Foundation too, involved very much in so-called talent hubs. Talk about the concept. I know here in Indiana there are a number around the United States. Elkhart County, Columbus, and Northeast Indiana have these talent hubs. What are they all about?
Sure, the talent hubs really start from the idea that it's hard for any one of these key legs of the stool to do this all on their own. We need government working with employers, working with the education training providers and community colleges to make this all happen. We need greater coordination and alignment. And so you really need a community-wide effort to get all these pieces working together. This involves identifying the key sectors and key occupations. This involves the employers thinking about how they can structure the workplace so there are job pathways, and then communicating with the community colleges and others to make sure that the courses, the programs, the credentials being offered are really aligned with what they're looking for. And finally, we got to get the message out. All the workers, young workers, old workers, need to understand these are the parts of the economy that are growing. These are the job opportunities. These aren't necessarily jobs that require a four-year degree. You may want to get a four-year degree as time goes on, but there's lots of great opportunities in today's labor market for people who have training post-high school, but not necessarily BA. We got to get that message out to everybody, and we got to show people the steps they can take to get there.
It's a great perspective from Dr. Chauncey Lennon from Lumina Foundation. Dr. Lennon, thanks for joining us. Also, thanks for the great work you and others do at the Lumina Foundation.
Our pleasure. Thanks so much.
That wraps up this week's Inside Indiana Business Television podcast. Remember, you can find all of this week's TV segments, as well as the top business news from throughout the state, at InsideIndianaBusiness.com. While you're there, you can also subscribe to our platform of free e-newsletters. This is Andy Ober for Inside Indiana Business.